Why not give positions on those? You think you can argue in favor of bump stocks? You think you can argue in favor of not having background checks cover all sales?
Chris, what I think is that we need to be serious about stopping mass murders and stopping crime. I've spent a lot of my professional career working in law enforcement, working to keep behind bars murderers and rapists and violent criminals. And we need to talk about what works and what doesn't, because every time you have a mass murder, you see a lot of Democratic politicians posturing and advocating all sorts of gun control. And inevitably, their gun control focuses on law-abiding citizens. And there are many problems with that, but the most important one is it doesn't work. It's singularly ineffective.
How do you know it doesn't work?
Because if you look at the jurisdictions with the toughest gun control laws, cities like Chicago, cities like Washington, D.C., they almost invariably have the highest crime rates, the highest murder rates.
No, but that's not true. The Gifford Center analysis says that with a few exceptions, states that have the strictest gun control measures have the lowest rates of gun deaths. And just a recent example, look at Connecticut. Look how they brought the numbers down.
Well, except you're advocating you're citing sources from a partisan source that is not reliable. Gun control, when you
Where are you citing them from? The NRA? Where are you getting them from?
Sir, when you disarm law-abiding citizens, the consequence is the criminals have the gun. Now listen, let me finish. I said we need to be effective, so there is a lot we can do to be effective in stopping crime. Just yesterday, I reintroduced legislation that I introduced in 2013. It was called Cruz. It was in the wake of Newtown. And what it does is instead of the Democratic talking points of going after law-abiding citizens, it focuses on criminals, on violent criminals. So one of the things Cruz did was increase funding for school safety by $300 million. The Obama administration had cut $300 million from school safety. You know, if that had been in place, that might well have meant that another armed police officer could have been in Parkland and could have stopped that killer before he murdered those teenagers. You did have an armed guard there, but I think there's a legitimate argument that school safety is part of it, but why ignore the other part? I mean, just like covering all sales, you know, it's always bothered me because I know how your mind works on some of these issues. And if you're going to cover some sales, why wouldn't you cover all sales? You know that in Texas, if you talk to responsible gun owners, they're not against having people checked, whether they buy person to person or at a gun show or on the internet. They're for safety. Why not be for that? Not only am I for safety, the background check system needs to be a lot more effective. If you look at Cruz and what it did to the background check system, it strengthened it. Number one, it directed it incentivized the states to report convictions to the background check system.
Right.
Many states don't do that. Number two, it directed the Attorney General to audit federal agencies to make sure they're reporting convictions.
But it didn't cover all sales.
Sir, why does that matter? Because in Texas, in Sutherland Springs, we had just a few months ago the worst church shooting in the history of the country. I was in that sanctuary the day after that shooting. I was with the victims of that crime. The shooter in Sutherland Springs, it was already illegal for him to purchase a firearm under federal law. Two reasons over. Number one, he had a felony conviction. Number two, he had a domestic violence conviction. Why was he able to buy a firearm? Because the Air Force, under President Obama, never reported the conviction. Cruz would have fixed that, and here's the more important piece. Cruz would have also directed the Department of Justice to prosecute felons and fugitives who illegally try to buy guns. The Department of Justice hasn't been doing that. So the Sutherland Springs shooter, when he went in to buy his guns, he lied on the background check. He checked a box, said he wasn't a felon. That was a lie. That's another felony. He checked a box, said he didn't have a domestic violence conviction. That was a lie and a felony, too.
All
Cruz would have prosecuted him and put him in prison, which meant he would have been in penitentiary and not murdering people in the sanctuary.
I'm just saying that the bill on the table is the Cornyn bill and fix Nix. You're going to have to figure out how to make peace with that or be against it. When you do,
Chris,
come back on the show, because I got to get cut for time. Go ahead, last word, Senator.
Let me ask one quick question.
Please.
Cruz got 52 senators supporting it, 9 Democrats, the most bipartisan support of any comprehensive bill. But Harry Reid and the Democrats filibustered Cruz, even though it targeted criminals and could have perhaps prevented these attacks. And what I would ask is, the next time you have a Democrat on, have you ever asked a Democrat, why did you filibuster Cruz, which targeted violent criminals and sought to put felons who try to illegally buy firearms in jail? I think that's cynical in politics. We ought to be focusing on substance and actually getting the job done.